What's up, Wanna Coffee fam? It's Kai, and we are back. We will have weekly contributions from strangers all over the world discussing various topics chosen by yours truly. And this is the first time these contributors have spoken to one another, so you are in for a real treat. Without further ado, here's Nikita and Alex with Western views on death.
Oh, it tells me that it's recording.
Okay, so death in the Western world is not really something that I typically think about. And I think I've really been blessed in my life where my life hasn't really been touched by major death. Yes, people in my life have died and it's been sad. But I'm really kind of lucky, whereas with the exception of my paternal grandparents and great-grandparents passed away before I was born or when I was too young to remember. And I haven't lost a lot of friends. So this is an interesting topic because I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't really think about it. I think that there's really a callous view of death. Like if we're looking at COVID deaths, and those who are COVID deniers, anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers, and they're like, only this super small percentage of people have died, so it's not that big of a deal. It still is. This is something that's very real, and
Right.
And I'm like, and it's not about you. It's not. Wear your mask or get your vaccine and shut up. It's not about you.
Yeah, and it's almost like the deaths, because it's not someone close to them, they can't connect with it. They can't relate. Be like, oh, those people over there died, so I can't, relate to that. And I think sometimes we're like, for example, when you just I don't know if it's just Westernized, but just the death of George
Floyd.
George Floyd, and that to me was impactful. But there are people who don't get connected because they're like, I can't connect to this individual or this person.
Yeah.
And
or they look at it as in okay, well, he committed a crime, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm sorry, but the punishment for passing a fake $20 bill is not murder. That's not penalty.
Yeah.
So the argument for this man losing his life, they're like, oh, he was a drug addict. Well, I could give a flying fuck if he was on every drug under the planet. The death penalty or being murdered in the middle of the street in broad daylight is not the punishment. That's not the punishment that fits the crime. And so.
But I feel like if it was a dog or something, I feel like it would have had more, for some people, it would have had more sympathy, because they could empathize, they could connect with that. So sometimes I feel like there's a desensitized view, or we're just desensitized to one another in this culture. But it's very fascinating in a way how there are, you see cultural things when it comes to how we celebrate, either how we celebrate the death of someone or how we honor the passing of individuals we do care about. I've noticed, I don't know if you've ever seen New Orleans, and they have your death is celebrated with basically like a funeral, a parade, a jazz funeral, in a sense.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and so they'll have this. It's a big thing. They'll have the trombones and and it's a thing. They have the little umbrellas, and it's just, we're celebrating and we're carrying your casket through the streets, and it's a whole march, in a way. Then I've seen how, I don't know if you like when like there's a loss of a young person, especially like urban communities and stuff. Like it was really big in the like the 90s and into the 2000s when someone passed away. Everybody got T-shirts and they
Yeah,
had like
yeah.
the rest in peace on the shirts or the buttons. So it was just kind of a way, and sometimes people would wear them to different functions where they were honoring that person. So just little. I've never seen that in any other culture where
Me
they,
either.
do that type of stuff.
Well, and I think in other cultures, it's just kind of like it's more of a natural thing. Like it's more of, there's an understanding that there's the beginning and the end. And I think that our culture doesn't always think about it that way. Like it's just like a natural ending. So when we look at those celebrations, but also it struck me when you were talking about the celebrations, like when something quote unquote shameful happens, and not that I necessarily think these things are shameful, but like families just depending on their religion or just their views in general, like if it's an overdose or if it is a suicide, it's always, they passed away.
Yeah.
And it's like kind of very like hush hush.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of highlighting who that person was despite how they passed, it's very like, oh, they passed away. And
yeah. And then it's like, or even this modern age when now you have social media, you throw social media in the whole. Before, when someone passed away, it was okay, let me pick up the phone, let me call the family and give my respects or whatever, or pass that information along to other people who may not know what that one person calls. And then be like, can you let the family know? That's all and you always have to tell that right person, because they're good at spreading all of that information to everyone. Yeah. And they were like, they take care of it. Next thing you know, and within 5 minutes, you're flooded with calls because everyone now knows. But social media can, in a way, it could be a good thing because you can give your condolences without that awkward phone call. Like for me, I'm always like, I want people to have a moment to process their grief.
exactly.
But I also want to acknowledge that I know. So it's just this fine line. So without having to make that call, a simple, message or, before the card, or send a card or something to let them know, hey, I know that you're going through something.
And then,
go ahead.
There is also that danger with social media where you take someone's grief and maybe make it about you. And when it's not that you're not grieving in some way, shape, or form, but it's not necessarily appropriate to always, blast that information if it's not.
Yeah. Or you tag the person's name. And what if people didn't know yet? That's a horrible way to find out. And I've actually seen that, where it's like, hey, the family wasn't alerted. Now you've really upset the family. Could you take that down? And it's like, if you want to just be in a situation where you want people to pray, you be like, just pray for me, pray for, and then, you don't have to go into it. Just say a prayer for, whatever.
Someone and I actually found out about someone from my high school, and she was just a beautiful soul. And I'm not even still 100% sure about her circumstances, but she died very young. And like, there's always been speculation, but I've never asked, nobody's ever told me anything, because it's also not necessarily my business. Like, we weren't that close, but I very much looked up to her. But I found out on social media, and it kind of like rocked me. Like, I was out with friends drinking, having a good time, and I just happened to scroll and see it, and then it was like, oh my God. And she was a couple years older than me, and now Facebook and their memorial accounts where they're
Yeah.
like stay there as a memorial. Like for a long time when Facebook used to tell you like, oh, so and so likes this page. Like I'm like, can you please stop telling me that my dead friend likes this page? Like that's
That was creepy, right?
yeah. And I mean, Facebook doesn't really do that anymore now that, especially now that it's more app based and people are really looking at it through the app. You don't see, oh, so and so likes this page.
Yeah, that was really
Facebook, like tone it down with that notification.
yeah. Or still putting them in your like algorithms when you're sending like a message out saying, hey, I just want to let everybody know happy birthday, or you want to tag everybody on your page for whatever, and you're tagging people that aren't even around anymore. So it's like you have to be conscious that you probably have people on your Facebook that aren't here anymore, and you just have their connected to their name just to go back to wherever they just to connect with people who are connected to them. And there's always that year round when the birthday, oh, it's such and such's birthday today, and then you're like, oh, so happy heavenly. I'm like, dude, I personally don't post on the wall, but I understand for some people it's therapeutic.
Yeah, I do. I get that. Yeah, it's not something I do either. And now it makes me think like I should have like a designated person to like just delete all my social media when I go.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to be just lingering around on the internet.
Yeah.
Somebody probably steal my identity more than me. But just how we like process grief now in this age, and just thinking about like before when someone was gone, they were gone, but now you have things like cell phones and the last call that you got, and how people hold on to the voicemails, and how traumatizing it is when they accidentally delete the voice.
Yeah.
Or those types of things. And you don't realize how that is until you realize you can't hear a person's voice in your head anymore.
Yeah.
But I think there's a way to, in a way, it more not immortalizes them, but it gives you, I guess, a level of comfort to feel like. Because some people would, I think it was a story where this girl was, or this guy, or somebody was texting the old number. I think it was a girl because she lost her dad, and she was texting the number, and the guy was responding. It was, and not in a creepy way, but it was more like, he would be proud of you or something, and it was, for her it was comforting, and for him it was comforting because I think he had suffered a loss too. So it's just, they came into each other's lives at the right time. But
it's interesting to think about processing grief too, because I don't think our the way our country is set up, we allow people to process grief. Like you don't even get that much time off of work if you lose somebody.
No, you got 3 days to process.
Yeah.
Plan the funeral. Oh, that's if you're, you have to, maybe 5 days if you have to, plan the funeral and stuff.
Yeah.
Even then,
And like if you have a funeral to go to, you only get a certain amount of time off if they're not immediate family. And it's like, why does it matter that this who they were to me? Clearly they mattered. I need to go to their funeral.
Yeah, and I have to bring the obituary, and it's very interesting for us in our culture. But I think wait, what did you say?
It's just like, okay, well, they died. You mourned. You mourned an adequate amount of time. Please come back to work.
Yeah, but I think in other cultures, depending on where you are, like sometimes overseas, you have to bury the person right away. So, like if you live far away on another country, you may not get to them in time. So it's like, I think in some cultures, they tell you, oh, such and such is sick. We're just letting you know it could be, you may want to come home now,
Yeah.
It could be any day, and some people get there just in time or don't get there in time before the burial happens. Or they tell you it's going to be too much money. We're already wrapping, we're burying the next day. So don't worry about trying to come.
Yeah.
And so I think that even then, how do you process your grief? Because you didn't have that moment to like mourn. Or COVID, like when people, like you said, when people were dying in COVID, just the funerals, how many people really didn't get to go to funerals? Like there are people who I know, you couldn't go to your family members' funerals because of COVID.
Yeah.
And that's kind of devastating.
Now, funerals and memorial services are affected by COVID regulations. Like, I stood outside, and luckily it was a very nice day, but I was standing outside in a long line for about a half hour, for a friend's memorial. And before we could go in certain amount of groups, and it's, obviously I think that makes sense. And but it was still crazy. I was like, oh my goodness, like I've never been.
Yeah. So, it's like, it's not as final, it's like you still have something lingering, and you don't have that way to just be, you couldn't hug your family members. You couldn't really be there for them in the way that you would normally be there for them in that time of need. So it's, it has been all of these different instances and situations and how we process it. And I don't know if we always necessarily process it the best, because I think sometimes people don't deal with things, and and we carry it, and then sometimes it'll be years, and then you're processing, you're starting to grieve. Like I've heard people say they couldn't cry, like through the funeral and everything, they just couldn't cry, and then like a year went by, and then they're bawling, and then it's like, now I'm in the process of grieving.
Recently at my friend's memorial, like when I found out about his passing, and it was very unexpected, and very sad, but like it didn't hit me like until I was standing right there, and I was like, oh my God, like this is actually, that's when like I broke down. Like, I was obviously sad before, but it didn't feel real. And I was talking to his stepdaughter, and she's like, I still am expecting him to just like walk into the room. We're all here. Like, and so I think, and everybody's timeline is different too, when how we process grief, how we think about things, and how we show our grief. And
I know, and it's very interesting when you talk about how she felt like, he would just come in the door. He still felt that way. I remember when it was I think one of my grandmother's funeral, and we were leaving the burial site, and I felt like I was leaving her. Like I had never felt that before. I'd been to, many funerals, but that was the first time, I guess, because she was like the first one that was kind of, I knew of,
There's our timer.
I know. And so, but yeah, just to wrap that up, it's such a unbelievable feeling sometimes to not have that moment, to feel that loss in that way, and how you process it.
And is there ever really closure to it? Probably not. You never really get that closure either. But I'm gonna go ahead and stop.
Yeah.
Always a treat hearing from Nikita and Alex. Thanks again, guys, for your discussion on views on death and the way the rest of the world views it. Thanks. That's it for us, folks. Catch us next week for a brand new episode with brand new contributors. If you like what you heard, please like, share, and subscribe. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at WannaCoffeePod. That's WannaCoffeePod. I'm your host, Kai, and let's wanna coffee next week. Cheers. Orange is not my new black.